Last week was another packed one for the Time Lord Victorious multi-platform event with another Tales from the Dark Time mini-comic within the Comic Creator app, 2 short stories from Big Finish focusing on the Master, and the second and final issue of the Titan Defender of the Daleks comic. As usual, I'm here to break down all the important lore information that we learned, how it ties into the wider event, and just generally keep you up to speed in case you're not getting everything. Welcome to the Time Lord Victorious Canon Update. Hi, I'm Phil, and every week there is a release in the Time Lord Victorious Doctor Who event. I'm making a video to help you keep up with what's going on. Now, I'm still technically a week behind due to how long the book, the first novel, took me to read and make notes on and make the video on. Like, again? Yes, again. I'm noting this on my student feedback form. What student feedback form? What are you doing in my bedroom? I'm learning. Well, do it quietly. Fine. Let's crack on. First, we have another in the Tales of the Dark Time mini-comic inside the Comic Creator app. This one sees the Daleks arrive on the planet Velocia, offering the Velocians protection from the Keturah. They end up taking some of the Velocians aboard the ship, saying they can only save a certain amount. But of course, it was a trick, and they're just planning on experimenting on them. Now, the Velocians have not been actually seen before in Who lore, but they have been mentioned. In the 7th Doctor audio Starlight Robbery, it said that they battled the Daleks on the 9th Rutton Moon, and the 12th Doctor is helping them off-screen repel an invading force at the very beginning of the TV episode The Girl Who Lived, before he arrives to save Clara, who's floating in space with love sprites in a helmet. The Dalek strategist is present on the ship that arrives from Velocia, as it appears from the design is the Dalek Time Commander. At this point in the event, we have not yet seen the Daleks arrive in the Dark Times yet, so it's a bit hard to place where this happens from their perspective. Especially as these Comic Creator mini-comics weren't included in the various character paths that were officially released. Not sure if it's relevant, but when witched Velocians are chosen to go on the ship, one comes running up saying, "Wait, I'm a musician!" To which a Dalek replies, "We have no room for musicians." Guess Daleks really don't like music. They'll take comedians and artists. Again, it's unclear how canonical to the event these little mini-comics actually are. They don't appear on any of the timelines, any of the paths, so it's a little bit ambiguous, but until it's absolutely confirmed that they are not, I guess I'll continue to include what we learn in them here. Next up, we've got the 2 Master-centric short trips, starting with Master Thief by Sophie Isles. This sees the Master heading to the mysterious repository to steal a map to the Boneyard of Naif. He utilises a lot of his old tricks, from taking an alias to hypnotising people to straight up murder, to get where he needs to go. In terms of where this takes place in the Delgado's Master's timeline, he's travelling the universe, so it must either be before he encounters the 3rd Doctor, where he too gets stranded on Earth for a time, or after he regains the ability to get off Earth. One theory I've seen is that it is before, and the events of the story are the reason he acts much kinder to Jo Grant in Terror of the Autons than other incarnations might have been. We learn he took a weapon from a jungle planet, a weapon that has killed whole intelligent species. The weapon is originally an enormous structure, like Greenwich Telescope, and relied on accurate input data to wipe out a species. Could this be Keturah technology? Given how little there is in this story to link it to Time Lord Victorious as a whole, this seems to me like the most likely option. So, big weapon, how does he transport it? Well, the Master is of course apt at miniaturization technology, so he shrinks the weapon and also alters it to only affect one person at a time. That effect that this weapon has is that it de-evolves people. Unfortunately, the race of people at the repository evolved from a species that fed on psychic energy, so de-evolving them ends up rather backfiring on the Master. As I said, I think the most likely to Time Lord Victorious is the weapon, and we may see it again in either its original form or shrunken post-Master form. I've also seen speculation that the weapon was what developed the Hond, who we've seen in the Titan Time Lord Victorious comics, and appear as a sort of sentient mass of primordial ooze in rough bipedal form. Could they have ended up like this because they were de-evolved? Nothing to back it up other than speculation, but it's a theory. The link to Time Lord Victorious is much more obvious in Simon Guerrier's short trip, Lesser Evils, as the Anthony Ainley incarnation of the Master comes face to face with one of the Keturah. It's just a single Keturah in this story, and it visits a planet and meets a primitive species, and this Keturah is about to judge it when the Master steps forth and attempts to advocate on the species' behalf. The Master in this story is said to have been trapped on this planet for years, having his TARDIS taken from him, and while beyond that there isn't much to place this in his timeline, writer Simon Guerrier, in an interview on the Who Shelf website, indicated where it fits. He's very different in his final story, Survival, from his previous appearance in Trial of a Time Lord, so there was space to suggest that something had happened to him that had affected his character. About the Keturah, we discover that the twin columns of text that adorn their robes are not their own language but appropriated symbols from worlds that had already been judged, memorials to the lives she had smited. The fact that the Master meets the Keturah in the process of fulfilling her mission raises an interesting question to which we don't get an answer here. Is the Master in the Dark Times, or are the Keturah still fulfilling their mission beyond the Dark Times? The primitive species on the planet are called the Muggalos, a six-armed species with a fondness for a native stone that they would grip in their sixth arm and hold for many years as it changed composition. These crystals seem to have some kind of psychic properties as well, although it's unclear if they'll factor again into the event. I thought it was worth mentioning them. Similarly unclear if relevant, the Master has a vision of 3 million years into the future where a fleet of Vendovian death ships arrive in the atmosphere that dwarf Moon Sparrow to attack a single castle, which happens to have the Master in it. And that's all the relevant facts and information to the whole event that I could really glean from these entries. As usual, this isn't a breakdown of the entire plot of the stories, so you'll have to buy them if you want that. I definitely recommend them, but it's more of an overview of the areas they do or might interact with the Time Lord Victorious event. Finally, in this episode we cover the second and last issue of the Titan comic Defender of the Daleks. Last issue, the 10th Doctor and Dalek strategists were confronted with one of the Hond in the Vault of Obscenities on Skaro. The Hond is described by the Doctor as primordial ooze given life, leading to the speculation by some that they may have been created with the weapon the Master steals in Master Thief. The Hond feel pain constantly, which has led them to want to eradicate all life in the universe to end their pain. In fact, the Doctor surmises that they are pain made sentient. Increasing their suffering makes them stronger. We actually learn a bit more about the Hond in the most recent Doctor Who newsletter in their Data Worm segment, where we're told they were a forbidden race lingered in the shadows of the Dark Time. They were a terrible miscreation, a being who experienced life only through pain. The Keturah judged them, and for once, their judgment was considered a mercy. We also learn that a Dalek Prime strategist is in a battered casing as punishment, probably for one of its own strategies not panning out. The Hond cracks the Prime strategist's already damaged casing, exposing the mutant within to view. Inevitably, the Doctor finds a way to defeat them by networking all the Daleks' weapons and altering them to a frequency that releases the pain of the Hond. Of course, as soon as he's served his purpose, the Daleks turn on the Doctor, which he fully expected and prepared for, setting off explosions that allow him to get away. He hopes to summon the TARDIS with his sonic, but the Daleks are blocking the signal. He needs help. Enter the 13th Doctor. Yes, 13 is now officially part of the Time Lord Victorious narrative. She's waiting for him in a corridor, and even though they've met before in the comics, due to the paradox that created, 10 doesn't remember. They escape the building, summon their TARDISes and make their escape, and go their separate ways. It's a fleeting cameo, really. Their issue ends with the Daleks indicating that their plan can continue, with another Doctor. And we see a flash of the 8th Doctor, indicating the future Big Finish stories where the Daleks enlist his help in the Dark Times. Finally, let's look at some Lava Lore information we've gotten through the newsletter so far, as this is an area I've neglected up until now. The data worm in the newsletter that went out on 8th of October, the Archive of Icelos is mentioned, which just so happens to be the title of the very first Dalek animated episode, coming soon. It mentions the information acquired there about the Lesser Order of Oberon, a group of assassins to which Brian the Ood belongs. The data worm hints at Brian, as it references one of their order ending up in the Dark Times, which we already knew from the novel covered in the last edition of the Canon update. There is also some more information about the planet Mordella, also seen in the novel, The Night, the Fall and the Dead. That the gateway there actually leads to the last universe, and it is the energy from that universe that the Keturah utilise in their mission. In the newsletter before that, there was some information on the great vampires, in particular that their coffin ships were used to transport themselves through the cold wastes at the edge of the dark times, and that these ships were also crammed full of their servants, which included the Bloodsmen, who were not full vampires but conditioned to obey their masters. We'll apparently be learning more about them in the upcoming novel All Flesh is Grass. There's also a hint that the king vampire fled after the battle. I'm not sure if they're talking about the battle in the novel, but we will, I guess, see. And as a clue, gives a link to the story page for the 4th Doctor TV story, State of Decay. And that brings us to the end of this edition of the Canon Update. I hope it's been useful, and don't forget to subscribe if you haven't already, because in the next edition of the Canon Update we'll be covering the Big Finish full cast audio drama He Kills Me Not, starring the 8th Doctor and Brian the Ood, and the second part of the Doctor Who magazine comic Monstrous Beauty, and I wouldn't want you to miss it. Also, don't forget to hit that like button. Or don't! I'm not your generic parental figure. Do what you want. But, you know, I'd appreciate it.